Hi, everybody. I'm Rabbi Batsheva Appel. I am the interim rabbi at Temple Israel here in Omaha. I have been here now for almost 6 whole months. I'm enjoying being at Temple Israel. I'm enjoying it being in Omaha, and I'm loving having the chance to engage in adult learning with all of you, both in person and on Zoom. I'm originally from the Pacific Northwest. I moved here from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. This is an interesting topic, I think. Our topic is, if you don't have anything nice to say, lashon harah, evil speech. So I'm going to start with the classic Hasidic tale that is told about the effects of evil speech, or how pervasive it can be, which is, there was a person who went to their rabbi and they said, Rabbi, I said so many things about people and I'm not sure what to do, and I need to do tshuva, and can you give me something to do? Please give me something to do so that I can do tshuva. So the rabbi says, okay, you know what? Here, take this feather pillow, and I want you to go to the top of the tallest building in town, and I want you to open the feather pillow up. And the man's like, oh, thank you so much. So he takes the feather pillow, he goes to the top of the tallest building, he opens up the pillow, and all of the feathers go flying all over. I mean, it's like it's snowing. The feathers go here and there and everywhere. And the man goes back to the Rabbi and says, Rabbi, that was so incredibly freeing. It was so wonderful to see all those feathers go here and there. It was like it was snowing. It was just something to behold. I feel so free. Thank you so much for helping me do tshuva for all those things I said. And the rabbi said, no, that wasn't the tshuva. Now what I want you to do is I want you to collect all those feathers. Every last one of them. And the point is that our language, our speech, once we let it loose, there isn't any really good way to take it back. There's no way to necessarily, reverse things so that you can make it better. That speech can go far, and, once we set it free, our words can go far and wide and all over. So let's start with Leviticus 19, verse 16. Lo telech rachil be'amecha, lo ta'amod al dam re'echa, ani Adonai. And I'm going to use the 1917 version of the Jewish Publication Society because it gets more to the meaning that I'm interested in. Thou shalt not go up and down as a talebearer among thy people, neither shalt thou stand idly by the blood of thy neighbor. I am the Eternal. So what do you think it means to go up and down as a talebearer? What does that mean? Yeah. Both sides. So essentially just spreading whatever it is that you hear, far and wide, good and bad, just blabbing everything. Okay. Anybody want to add to that? And anybody on bad stories and good stories? Okay. Okay. Would it make a difference if I said that the word was like, would it change the meaning if it wasn't you shall go up, you shall not go up and down, but you shall not peddle tales among your people? You should not be a peddler of tales. Would that change things? Would that shift the meaning? Is somebody who peddles worse than somebody who just tells the tales? Does that make a difference?
peddle, they look for people.
If they peddle, they're looking for people who will listen to them. Okay, that part makes sense. And there is a sense in the word peddling of making some money on it. Yes. Okay. So that's another possibility. Okay.
My
And
thought, I have a thought.
yes.
My thought is peddling also could mean that every time you repeat it, it changes.
Ooh, who was that, by the way?
I'm Carol.
Hi, Carol. Yes, I think that is also a possibility that as you are peddling your, the things that you are sharing, there's the possibility that it shifts and changes, kind of like the telephone, the game of telephone. I think most of us have played that one at least once. Okay, whether or not we've done it in real life is a whole other thing. And yes, the story of the feathers, Sherry and Jeffrey, was in the children's machzor for Yom Kippur. That is true. So there is this old idea that there's a prohibition against something called rechilut and something called lashon harah. Lashon harah is the big category. Rechilut is part of lashon harah. And it is this idea that there is a prohibition based in the Torah on talking about people behind their backs and telling tales about people. And you'll notice that I'm just saying talking about people, and I'm not even saying that it is about telling awful things about people, although there is a tendency to see lashon harah as evil speech because the word harah means evil or bad. But we'll see later that the speech could be absolutely true. The speech could be absolutely true, and still there is this idea of it's not your story to tell.
Oh, damn it.
It's not your story to tell. So let's take a look at the next piece, which is from the Babylonian Talmud. It's Tractate Arachin. And on this page, I did 3 excerpts from the same page. So it starts by saying, in the West, which means Eretz Yisrael, because the East refers to Bavel, refers to Babylonia, because remember, the 2 great centers of Jewish learning at this time were Babylonia and Eretz Yisrael. And in fact, there are 2 Talmuds, the Talmud being a legal book that is an explanation of Jewish law. And there are 2 of them, and one is the Babylonian Talmud, which is much more well known. And the other is the Talmud Yerushalmi, which originated in Eretz Yisrael. So they refer to each other sometimes, and they've got different approaches and different language. There's often overlap with the people who are speaking in both Talmuds, but there is this sense of when they're referring to the West, they're referring to Eretz Yisrael. So Taxman's, we're going to get to the Chafetz Chaim at the end of our presentation because he's relatively newer than the Babylonian Talmud. The Babylonian Talmud was codified or kind of closed in about the 7th century, 6th, 7th century. Oh, I think Karen has it. God bless you. Thank you. Okay, so in the West, Eretz Yisrael, they say third speech, which means malicious speech about a third party, kills 3 people. Understand it's using the word kill deliberately. It doesn't see this as hyperbole. It kills the one who speaks malicious speech and the one who accepts the malicious speech when they hear it, and the one about whom the malicious speech is said. So according to the Babylonian Talmud, anytime people are engaging in this kind of gossip, it's not a victimless crime. It's not a victimless crime. And in fact, not only is it not victimless, but it is also, in fact, it affects every single person to their detriment. It affects every single person to their detriment. Has anybody ever been in a situation where people wanted to tell you things that you didn't want to hear about somebody else? How did you shut that down? Were you able to shut it down? Sometimes, and not until it was out. Why did you have such a strong feeling of wanting to shut down the conversation?
Very derogatory comment about somebody who we were both friends with.
Uh-huh.
I'm not sure that it was true, and if it was true, I'm not sure it was any of my business to know.
Ah, okay. I like how you put that. Okay, so Sherry Taxman, what do you want to say?
So in Jeff's family, when conversations got to be uncomfortable for anybody, people in his family would say, when is Purim?
Meaning?
I have no idea. I married into this family. I didn't grow up there. But in
Ah.
the conversation had changed the topic. Now,
That was their.
and Jeff is 2 rooms away, and he'll wander in and he can explain this to you, but this was their tradition before I married into this family.
Okay, so in essence, what they would say is, to change the topic, they would say, when is Purim?
Right.
That is a fascinating way of getting things back on track, because it's talking about the most irreverent holiday in the Jewish calendar. That's a very interesting approach. So do you think that, the Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud here is overstating things? Can it really affect the person who says it, the person who hears it, and the person about whom they're talking? I'm seeing some nods. I'm seeing a lot of nods. Okay. How do you think that we talked about shutting it down if you're the one who is being told these things? How do you think that it affects the person who speaks? Because they seem to feel that, they've got the power. They're the ones sharing the story. So what you're saying, for people who are listening on Zoom, what you're saying is that, thank you. What you're saying is that the person who is the gossip peddler makes themselves appear to be untrustworthy. And being untrustworthy can have ramifications to your standing in a community and to how people view you. And then there's long-term implications for being untrustworthy. I'm seeing nodding heads still. Okay.
I don't know to what extent feelings enter into this a bit, but anytime I spew forth evil words, I know afterwards I felt like, yeah, I have not felt very good myself. And that's certainly an effect that it's had on me.
So, remind me of your name?
Barry.
Barry. So Barry talked about how this kind of speech affects your standing in the community, but you're talking, Mark, about how it feels to be the person to say these things.
Right.
And that it actually physically affects you.
Indeed.
Okay. Okay. Any other suggestions? Sherry, you have your hand up. Is that from last time or is that something new?
No. So if the person, are we talking about situations where somebody is saying something to someone else about a third person who is not present?
Correct.
Okay, then that's different, because if the person is present, I remember my dad teaching me, if you cause somebody to blush, it's as if you drew blood and you killed them. So if the person,
Keep going.
that's different than gossip mongering when the person with whom they're discussing is not present.
So Sherry talks about another Talmudic injunction about the language that we use. And it is essentially, it's actually more specifically in the Talmud, if you cause somebody to blush and then they lose all of their color and turn white, it is as if you have killed them. And you have lost your place in the world to come. That's how seriously it talks about it. It is a category of speech called ona'at dibur, which is kind of oppressive words. So I see where your father got that. Other thoughts about this first paragraph from the Talmud? Okay, let's take a look at the next paragraph. Rabbi Chama, son of Rabbi Hanina, says, what is the meaning of that which is written? Death and life are in the hand of the tongue. Does the tongue have a hand? Usually the word hand for that verse is translated as power, because there is this within the biblical text, the word hand represents power. So when we talk about God redeeming Egypt with a mighty hand, what we really mean is God redeems Israel from Egypt with great power. Okay, but it does use the word yad chazakah, a mighty hand. Does the tongue have a hand? Rather, the verse comes to tell you that just as a hand can kill, so too a tongue can kill. If you were to claim that just as the hand kills only from close by, so too the tongue kills only from close by. Therefore, the verse states, their tongue is a sharpened arrow. The tongue kills like an arrow that is fired from a bow at a great distance. So let's talk about an arrow that is fired from a bow at a great distance. What happens after the archer looses the string of the bow and the arrow goes off? Can it be called back? Can it be controlled? Once you've made the shot, you can't control it after the fact. You can't make sure that it only hits the target exactly. And it's entirely possible to have collateral damage. Just as if there's somebody who, engages in that old practice, but dangerous practice of firing a gun on New Year's Eve into the sky. What goes up must come down. And there's nothing that says that a bullet that you fire on New Year's Eve or for any other celebration is not going to hurt somebody. And you can't control where it's going to end up. So we're back to our feathers that we can't control where they go, right? In fact, this section, I had to edit it, actually goes on to say that the words that you say can be dangerous from the distance from the ground to the heavens. That's how far the damage can reach. That it's not just a small thing, it's not just a near thing. It can kill something that's very, very far away. Okay. Any reactions to that? Thoughts about that? A lot of killing in these texts. Okay. That's not a Jewish saying. No, I'm serious. That is not a Jewish saying. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. Not Jewish. They can hurt. They can hurt a great deal. I think one of the things that we're learning from social media is how much words can hurt and how seriously we need to take words. I mean, one of the things to remember, it's a text I didn't bring here because I was trying to keep this to an hour. One of the things to remember is, how does God create the very first thing that God creates in the book of Genesis? How does God create it? I'm sorry? With words. God says, let there be light, and there is light. God creates with words. We too can create really amazing things and things that are not, things that are really awful with words. Our words can create realities in a whole bunch of different ways. And our words count. It's not just a small thing. It's not just a small matter, the words that we say. The other thing to know is that, have any of you encountered people who will say things that are really quite cruel and then say, well, I'm just joking? People have encountered that? So if you're saying that your words don't count, then what is it? What happens when you say words of blessing? If you're saying that words don't matter at all, then why do you tell somebody I love you? Why do you say words of blessing to your loved ones, whoever they are? If words don't matter, words really do matter. It's not a small thing. So sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. Not Jewish. And this is proof. This is absolute proof, because this is, the words you say are as deadly as an arrow that you cannot call back. So try that next time somebody says sticks and stones. Okay, and then the last one from the Babylonian Talmud. Rabbi said to Abaye, I hold in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yosei. As Rabbi Yosei says, in all my days, I never said something and then turned around to see if the person I was speaking about was standing behind me, listening, as I would say it even to the person involved. Now, there is an approach to how to live one's life. I mean, I know that I've been caught sometimes saying a thing and then turning around and seeing the person I was speaking about. I tried very, very hard to hold by Rabbi Yosei, not always successful. But it's certainly something to consider in terms of how we live our lives. So let's move on to Maimonides and the Mishnah Torah. Mishnah Torah, referred to as the Yad HaChazakah, the strong hand or mighty hand. It is a code of law. It takes all of the legal material of the Talmud and all sorts of other legal materials and organizes them according to topic. And not only that, it's put into absolutely beautiful, accessible Hebrew. I mean, it's truly a tour de force as a legal work done by Maimonides, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, who lived from 1137 to 1204. He was a physician, he was a philosopher, he was a legal expert, he was a commentator. He was born in Spain and he died in Egypt, where he was a physician in the high court there. His work is really pretty amazing. So on the next slide, Karen, thank you. Regardless of whether the slander is spoken in the presence of another or in their absence, or if the slander spread from mouth to mouth causes harm to another, to their body or property, or even to cause them anguish or fear to their soul, behold, this is the iniquity of an evil tongue. That's pretty broad. I mean, if you think about it, you could say it in somebody's presence, you could say it where nobody else is around. But if the words spread from person to person, you know how fast things spread in this community. You know, let me tell you the news. You're never going to believe what happened. Did you hear about? And some of it is for the benefit of the community. If something happens to somebody and they need assistance, and the spreading of, you know, the news helps them get that assistance, then okay. But if it's just to have the power of having the news, to have the power of being the one who knows, so that you get to talk to the person who doesn't know, you get to share something with them that they don't know. It's not a small thing. It's not a small amount of power. Questions, either from the Zoom folks or from the in-person folks? Yes, Sherry.
So years ago, reading books by the Chafetz Chaim, so there are exceptions for marriage or going into business, that you're allowed to say to somebody, your son, your daughter is going to marry XYZ person, or you're talking about going into business with XYZ person. There's ways to say these things. And it's been a long time, so I don't remember.
So it is a great Jewish approach to look for the boundaries and the limitations of the things that I'm suggesting. And in fact, there are limitations to the things that I'm talking about, and that includes and we've got material about from the Chafetz Chaim that's coming up. And yes, you are correct. If you are going to help somebody avoid a disastrous situation, whether it's a personal situation like marriage, or a business situation like going into business together, you are permitted to say something. You have to be careful with what you say. You have to be careful what you share. You have to be sensitive to make sure that you're not, getting into, just the joy of having the information. But you can say things that need to be said. It's not if you can never call out abuse. That's not lashon harah. Calling out abuse, calling out problems, that's not lashon harah.
Are those the only two exceptions?
I would say that abusive situations, situations where there might be fraud or deceit involved. I believe that those are the big exceptions, yes. I could be wrong because I don't think I'm the expert in the Chafetz Chaim that your family is. So, I mean, I've studied some of his work, but I haven't studied all of it. Okay, we're gonna go to the next one. So the Chafetz Chaim is known for, the Chafetz Chaim is actually a person. His name was Rabbi Yisrael Meir HaKohen Kagan. And he became known as the Chafetz Chaim. The Chafetz Chaim is a reference to Psalms, Psalms 34:19, which is, who desires life. And he wrote a book that became known by that title and then was given that title. Okay, so he was given the title of the Chafetz Chaim. He lived in the late 19th century, and he lived in Belarus, and his life work was all about lashon harah. So that is one of our modern commentaries. I've also included another modern commentary, which I think is the next slide, which is, yes, from Rossini, from his Barber of Seville, which is about calumny and how it starts small and just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So it's fascinating to me that Rossini starts with the calumny as a little wind, as a very gentle little breeze, which numbly, softly, lightly, kindly begins to whisper. And then his language makes it grow bigger and bigger and bigger. If you can go to the next slide, Karen. Missing, where's the rest of it? Interesting. Okay, so the next slide. And it just keeps getting bigger and more, it gets louder and louder and louder, and keep going. And finally ends with the person who's been defamed, degraded, trampled, scourged by the public opinion, fortunately dies. I think we've seen a couple of things like that in our time, where something really small has just gotten bigger and bigger. And some of it has not been true. So if you think about the person that was blamed in 1996 for the bombing at the Olympics in Atlanta, and he had zero to do with it. He had zero to do with it, but everybody figured that he did. And his life was made miserable. And even after an apology, a lot of people would still think that he was the one who did it when he had nothing to do with it. He was just a security guard. That, I would say, is a very big example of that. Sherry is adding the Central Park Five as somebody, as another grouping of people who were slandered in their way, and people still to this day think of them as the perpetrators of that crime when they were not. So that would be another example. Do any of you have examples of that type?
Well, our history certainly does testify to that.
Okay, Matt, I couldn't quite hear your example.
Several people on this. I don't think they were convicted. But it proved that nothing to do with whether they were. No, I guess not.
Okay, so what Matt is mentioning is a case in western Nebraska, I've got to get my map of Nebraska right in my head. A case in Western Nebraska where several people were accused of a crime that they did not commit, and were never even tried, but they were jailed. And they're now suing to get money, and it's more, you were saying it's more money than the county will ever be able to pay. Okay.
That was beautiful.
Okay,
Okay, they did pay.
sorry. I got a new thing. Okay. Thank you very much, Karen. You're doing so much. It is an interesting evening regarding tech. Let me just say that, okay? It is an interesting evening regarding tech. I think it's almost a good thing that although I was really looking forward to co-teaching with Cantor Alexander, it's almost better that it's just me tonight. So, and again, my apologies. Cantor Alexander would be here if she could, but we found ourselves having to need to cover more things than we realized that we would cover. So she's actually teaching at the BEIT MIDRASH for the Hebrew High over at Bethel tonight. So. So,
Sorry.
it's always something. Okay, so now let's look at the Chafetz Chaim, who I mentioned before. So he has a couple of different writings. This is his prohibition against rechilut. Rechilut is gossip. Lashon harah is evil speech. Here's the one that I think really floors people the first time that they hear it, which is that all that we have said about rechilut being forbidden applies even when the story is absolutely true, containing no admixture of falsehood. Does that make a difference in your minds about whether or not the gossip is true? Does it feel like gossip that is true is somehow worse than somehow better than gossip that is false?
It's still an invasion.
Can you expand on that?
Sure, if somebody publishes information about somebody that's considered private, and it affects that person's professional or personal life, it's still a tort.
Okay,
Still a civil.
okay. Does it matter if it's not private and still true?
I think it doesn't. I think it's still an invasion of privacy.
Okay. So even if it's public knowledge and true for people to go around sharing it widely is an invasion of privacy, is what you're saying.
Depending upon the person.
Okay.
And, the intent too. It's all part too.
Okay. What if the intent was just, I just wanted to share a story? What if it was that kind of indifference to other people?
Well, then you get into, did they say it? They may not have said it with the intent, but they could have said it with the knowledge that even though they didn't have intent, they understood that it could cause damage. So it doesn't necessarily have to be intentional. You can say something that's going to cause damage because if you say it, if you publish it, it's going to cause problems.
Okay. Okay, so now I need to repeat what you just said. Wow. Okay, let me see. Okay, so where Barry started was by saying that somebody who says something that's absolutely true, it's an invasion of privacy. And I followed up with, but what if it's public knowledge? And Barry said, still, it's an invasion of privacy, and it is, he called it a tort, which I understood to mean it's damaging. It damages somebody. It's not just a thing that's said. It actually damages somebody. He said, it doesn't matter if it's public, it doesn't matter if it's true. And then he added the layer of intent. So the back and forth between us was, does it matter if they intended to make somebody feel bad or to damage somebody, or if they were just, it was a good story that they were sharing? And Barry came down with their intent doesn't matter because they still did something that damages somebody. Did I summarize that pretty well?
Well, if they say something and they say they didn't have the intent, would a reasonable person have the knowledge that it would cause a problem?
Okay,
And the fact that it's public knowledge, it may depend on what it was. It may depend on what did the public know about it. I mean, it may not be something that they could go after somebody for damages, but still.
okay. So yeah, the intent part means, would a reasonable person assume that you would be hurting somebody else by saying it? And then we're talking about degrees of what public knowledge is. So now we're getting into the weeds. But it's interesting. Okay, so it could also make others feel bad about being less than that person. I think, Sherry, you're going to have to either unmute yourself or add to your chat.
Well, if somebody were to say something positive about somebody, like, you are the most amazing rabbi in the universe. So it's possible that every other rabbi in the universe might feel bad about that because they are not the most wonderful rabbi in the universe. Or if you're the, prettiest, tallest, strongest, most athletic, whatever, most beautiful, that it makes everybody else feel they're not. So I
Got it.
don't know if that's lashon harah, but it could create that atmosphere of other people feeling bad about themselves because they're not the best. I feel like the William Goldman, Princess Bride, with everything being est, the biggest and brightest.
Got it. Okay. Okay, so I'm thinking I'm understanding what you're meaning. You're talking about how others feel in relation to the speech that's offered. I would say that that's not quite what's being referred to here. What's being referred to here is that this idea that telling a true story doesn't get you doesn't give you leave to tell the story. Doesn't matter whether the story is true or false. Talking about somebody else in a way that, as Barry says, it violates their privacy, is seen as problematic. So I think that's where they're going. That's where that is going. I think you have a point about, what happens when we engage in these kinds of contrast and flattery and, building somebody up, is it that at the expense of other people? And I would say, yeah, words count. But in this instance, I think it's basically saying telling a true story does not give you a free pass. Telling something that is true, whether or not that truth is public or private, does not give you a free pass to talk about other people. Yes.
So under what kind of conditions is it acceptable to ever talk about it?
So that's what becomes complicated for us as modern people who operate in the world that we operate in. Okay, Sherry, the question was, so when can we talk about other people? And, Sherry mentioned, well, aren't the two exceptions, if somebody's going to, or, marriage or business? And I said, yes, those are two of the exceptions. If somebody is going to get hurt, then you have leave to share information that is essential for their decision-making process so that they don't go into a situation blind. And even then, you have to be careful about how you word it and how you share it and with whom you share it and how publicly you share it. And certainly, if you know of abuse that's happening, you are permitted to share that as well. But, think about all the times that, we get caught up with people. And, the getting caught up means that you learn about everybody else that you haven't heard about in ages. I called a colleague this week because another colleague of ours had died. And I had, I'd been thinking about both of them, and I was said to him, I said, I haven't spoken with you in a while. I thought I would call and see how you were. So, what we shared with each other was a lot of different things, but it was also kind of, so what's going on with so-and-so and what's happening with this one? And, some of it was just, learning what was going on, where they were. And some of it probably did verge into lashon harah. It's hard because this is how we relate to each other. So I think the important part to know is being conscious of the words that we use, being conscious of who we're saying them to, being conscious of, would you say this if you were going to say it in front of the person? And I agree with you, not so easy. In a world where, magazines are sold based on gossip.
Value communication, especially if communication is true. I would think of the value of communication as false. But if communication is true, there could be a value.
There could be a value, but it could also be something that other people don't want shared. I mean, I still remember to this day, there was a member of my community who died. And, I was working with the family and, talking with them about the funeral and whatever. And I announced the death at services so that people would know that this person had died. And the family was really, really upset with me because they hadn't wanted that information shared, period. Now, I had shared the information with the value of the community should know that a member of the community has died in case they want to come to the funeral, but the family saw it in a different way. So I don't know that it's possible to get it right all the time. I think it is possible to be conscious of the possibilities.
Because the plan that's going to do good for the family. But I'm not sure that might have been speaks to in hindsight regretted. But I don't know what I would consider it was. I don't know if it was a good speech. It was speech that had an unforeseeable impact. But if you're sharing information with the intention to do good. If I know that a family.
Okay, you have to stop there because there's only so much that I can transmit at a time. So what she's saying is that intent makes a difference. Okay, that intent makes a difference in this instance, and I intended for the good, and I couldn't have known that they would see it another way. And that, with good intent, perhaps it wasn't evil speech. Don't know that. I don't know that that's true. Okay, Terry Joy, you have your hand up, and then I've got I'm going to go to the very end, the last slide, Karen. So, yeah, the last slide.
I have a question for you that's on a little bit of a different topic, and maybe you want to address it at the end, but I'm curious to know that, so the person that receives the gossip, maybe they have not wanted to receive it and they receive it. They're in a group or something. And so now they're burdened with it. How do they become unburdened? What is their responsibility then in this situation? What happens to them then? How can they absolve themselves of this? Or, what's their responsibility in this now?
Well, that's part of the problem. There is no way to put down that burden once somebody's given it to you. There just isn't a way. Once somebody has burdened you with this, there's really no good way to unburden yourself. So, okay, so the last slide, which none of the people in the room can see because it's not in the handout. Sorry, let me tell you, the Zoom people can tell you that I put some real time into these slides. I think the Zoom people can tell you that these are really fine slides.
They're gorgeous slides.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Karen. So the last slide, which is based on another story that I have always heard attributed to the Chafetz Chaim, but could not find in my Google searches as associated with him, but I think it's a really good one. So he asked the question, what can we learn from the telephone, the telegraph, and the train? And he said to his students, from the telephone, we can learn that the words that we say here can be heard very far away. From the telegraph, we learn that every single word counts, because, you guys at least know what the hell a telegraph is. Because you have to pay for every single word. Thank God. I don't know how much longer I'm going to be able to tell this story. And from the train, you learn that you could be 1 minute late and be unable to continue your journey. That time makes a difference. That being 1 minute late and everything is lost. So thank you for your patience with the technology. Thank you for coming out this evening, and thank you for learning together.
Oh, thank you so much, Rabbi. And your patience has been incredible to make this opportunity happen. What a timely topic as families are going to be getting together and traveling and perhaps sending telegraph messages. You never know. So
I don't think Western Union does that anymore.
well, I think it depends on what data plan they have. on
Yeah,
their phone.
God.
I don't know. Anyway,
I don't think you can do it anymore. I just don't think it exists.
have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much. Next week, we will have Rabbis Abraham and Barrison joining us about putting stumbling blocks in front of others. So thank you, everyone online on Zoom. Thank you, Karen, for your continued facilitation on the other side. And we'll see y'all next week. Thank you, Rabbi.
Take care and be well, everybody. And thank you to Zoom Maven Karen.